Welcome to Judge's Corner. This is Judge Matthew Sabaugh, and today we have special guests from the Macomb Intermediate School District, enforcement officers Judith Sutherland and Carla Rosado. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Judy, I'd like to start with you. If you could give a little brief introduction of yourself, your background, and what your current position is.
Okay, I've been with Macomb Intermediate as an attendance enforcement officer this is my 19th year now, so quite a while. I came in from having worked with the Macomb County Juvenile Court system with their drug abuse program, their community service and victims' rights. And prior to that, had worked as a substance abuse therapist, working with families and children. So, you know, it's been a long-standing career of working with the local residents and trying to address, in whatever way we can, various issues that come up, and have found that the issues with the school certainly tie in with all of the background. So it's a position that I have enjoyed and certainly feel like it was an appropriate match for the background that I had.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Carla, could you give us a little of your background?
I'm currently the other attendance enforcement officer at the ISD for Macomb County. Before that, I worked at the St. Clair Shores District Court as a both clerk and probation officer.
Thank you. Well, I think part of the goal here is to educate the public about what you do as enforcement officers, and also about what the law is with regard to compulsory school education. I understand now the law has recently changed that it is required that students attend school, the public schools, or an alternative, according to the statute, between the ages of 6 and 18. Is that accurate?
That is true.
Okay. And what does that mean as far as the responsibilities of the parent, Carla? What happens if a child does not attend school regularly according to that statute?
There's a couple of different ways that we would address that. First, the school gets involved and they try to do whatever they can to address the situation that's going on, whether it's the principal or assistant principal calling the home. If the attendance doesn't improve, they'll do a referral to our office and we'll set up a meeting with the family. We'll send a certified letter asking them to come meet us and find out what the situation is. One way, if it's the parent that is at issue with not sending the kid to school, sometimes the parent can end up in district court. And the other way that it can end up is if the parent is getting the kid to school or have done everything in their power to get the kid to school and he still leaves school, then we can take the kid to juvenile court under a truancy or delinquency petition.
Okay. And Judy, what kind of resources do you have as an attendance enforcement officer? Obviously, if the parent still doesn't continue to send their child to school, you have you guys have the authority actually to request a warrant from the prosecutor's office and to issue a charge for a misdemeanor. Is that correct?
Correct, but the main thing that people I think aren't aware of, because of course the only cases that anyone ever hears about are the ones that do end up in the court system. It is actually an incredibly small percentage of the student population in Macomb County. We have about 141,000 students throughout the school districts. There are 21 districts and a number of parochial and charter schools. But out of those 141,000, we get on an average around 2,000 referrals a year to our office. And of those, a lot of them, if we don't see evidence that the school has done enough to try and intervene, or if we look into it and find out that in fact it's medically based and it just needed more documentation to justify the numbers or things like that, we may not set up. So we end up with about just over 1% of the student population gets referred, about 1.5%. And out of that 1.5%, 88% never end up in the court system. Unfortunately, it's those cases that do end up in court that people are aware of. But the resources, when we meet with them, we absolutely try and plug in any resources. There is a link through the Macomb Intermediate School District website. It's misd.net for the Right Connection directory. And it has 274 pages of resources available in Macomb County with virtually every scenario that a family may be presented with. So we certainly would encourage anyone facing a problem, if they have internet access, get onto misd.net, go to the right connection and look to see if there's an answer, or school counselors, probation officers, concerned family members. There's a lot of resources that unfortunately are also getting tapped because of, the finances throughout the state. But we try and plug in resources if the family is trying to work with us, and if they don't work with us at all, that is when they're most likely to end up in the legal system.
Our priority is going to be the student.
It's so important, obviously, for kids to go to school. It's why the legislator created this law. As a judge, it's one of the most difficult things is dealing with these cases, because there's a child that if he doesn't go to school, he or she doesn't go to school, they're going to be delayed in everything that they could be in the future. So part of my job as a judge, I feel, is to get the child the help they need. And really, without the parent, without them on board,
Right.
it's going to be very difficult. So what kinds, how do you, first of all, what do you find is like a common scenario as to why a parent wouldn't want to, or isn't able to send their child to school?
There's a continuum of reasons, and it could be anywhere from an isolated incident to something as severe as alcoholism or drug dependency, maybe abuse going on in the house. There's just a continuum. I think the most part is probably transportation and being able to get the kid there. There's, if there's no busing available with the school, what kind of neighborhoods are they living in? Do they want the child to walk to school? Do they want to get up and walk the kid to school in the morning? That's a big one. That is a big one. We've had a lot of homeless situations where we work with those. You don't see the homeless cases necessarily coming to court. There's gas cards that the ISD does. There's all kinds of things.
So there's resources out there that you're able to direct these parents to solve those problems, to help them solve.
Yes. It's always, the missing school is just a symptom of something else going on. It's 9 times out of 10.
Although I think one of the things that we see, and that ends up in front of the judges too, is making sure that the priorities are lined up. A lot of the families are under a lot of stress. They are required to be going back to school themselves if they were dropouts, or being required to get some kind of jobs where possibly the scheduling hasn't been figured out, or they may eventually get the child to school, but it's around the parent's schedule rather than around the educational schedule. And that's a problem, because the kids are missing scheduled instruction time. And so it's not just the absences, it's when it gets treated more like it is, more of a daycare type setting for early elementary rather than the child's only opportunity to go to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. School of choice has created some positive things, but it's also been a problem in our caseload on occasion, because parents may have chosen a school thinking that the school would provide a better education, but then the parent doesn't have the resources to get them there consistently and consecutively. So they may have their cars break down, they may not have gas money, they may get tied up in traffic, they may have a babysitter who is a grandmother who lives in Detroit and they're trying to get them back across town. And next thing you know, the child has 80 days that they didn't get the full day that was scheduled for them. So, you compound some of the pressures that the parents are under. But like Carla said, we see ourselves as child advocates. When we're there, it's not to get the parent in trouble or anything like that. It is, what do we see needs to be done in the child's best interest? And if we can fix it at our level, we do. And if those 12% that we can't, we end up in the court system.
And how much interaction do you actually have with the children in these cases? Did you or somebody else from the district
We'll start
meet with
seeing
them?
them in 6th grade. We will start seeing, and
Okay.
in fact, a case that comes to mind that pertains to that was an 8th grader I had last school year, was very worried about leaving his mother home because the boyfriend was abusing her. So she would drive him to school, and he would leave the school to go back home to make sure that she was safe. So in that particular incident, the mom wouldn't come meet me. I had to track her down on the phone, and finally, after a couple of phone conversations, got her to meet me at the school. and talked about everything, told her she wasn't in trouble at this point, this is, what you need to face. She did end up going to Turning Point, has moved on, and she keeps in touch with me every now and then and says, I'm doing great. And her son is managing to graduate from school this school year.
So really, you wear so many hats. You serve as a counselor to the kids when they're older than 6th grade?
Yeah, we'll meet with them
Generally.
starting in middle school.
Okay. And do you find that the kids are becoming delinquent or incorrigible the more school they miss? Do they start getting involved in other
Yes.
in drugs and alcohol, that sort of thing?
Yes. More often than not, and Judy can attest to this doing it the number of years, is that when you meet with a 7th or 8th grader, you can look back at their history, and there's been a history of chronic absences throughout school. So they're behind. And those typically are the kids that act out in school, the ones that can't keep up academically. Those are the ones that don't want to show up on a regular basis because there's so many gaps from elementary, they can't make it through middle school.
And we have, the schools are dealing with our early elementary, and we do prioritize to try and address the early elementary. If we get 20 referrals and can only schedule 10, we look at them each individually, but we certainly feel we make a greater impact with addressing early elementary because, the schools end up allocating special education resources for learning disabilities, which are based on a child not being where they should be. And when, like Carla said, you look back, it's because they have 2 years less instruction than the other 5th grader they're sitting next to, because of attendance issues that were out of their control.
So time is really of the essence with these issues. If you don't get to it quickly, the kids fall farther behind.
Yes.
And they feel bad about themselves. Children don't like missing school a lot. They don't like going in late. They don't like being the odd man out.
Right.
And then they get to the point where their self-esteem is taking a hit, and it affects certainly the whole dynamics of all of it. Then they do get resistant to being in school.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the cases that do come to court that actually are heard here in the 37th District Court. Thank you. We'll be right back.
We need a claim number?
When I started taking care of Mom, I didn't realize the challenge of playing so many roles. But above all, I'm still her daughter.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving. We're here to help.
There are a million places you'd never consider texting. So why would you do it while driving? Leave risky driving to the professionals. Stop the texts, and together we can stop the wrecks.
You sure you don't want some? It's chamomile. Listen, you are extremely terrifying. Just the scariest undead subhuman thing on TV, and I really mean that. But I am worried that you could give my kids nightmares if they see you, so I'm gonna have to block you. So that's it. Oh, and tell the zombies they're blocked too.
Thanks for calling the GED Pep Talk Center. Jerry Stiller speaking. Your level 7 in-your-face pep talk.
I can keep pushing you. Believe me, I'm good at it. But at some point, you're gonna need to start pushing yourself.
See, once you've got your GED diploma, you'll feel so good about yourself.
You tell them. You can't change your past, but you can definitely change your future.
That makes me so happy, I'm ready to bust out a dance.
Mr. Trejo, can I transfer this guy to you? My gentle technique isn't really working. You need something a little more
Persuasive.
Yes.
You listen, and you listen good.
Hey, where's my sandwich? Terry? Terry!
Take it from me, the King DMC. It's a real cool thing to get your GED.
Get that diploma!
Now hold on and we'll find you free GED classes. Capiche?
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
Welcome back to Judge's Corner, everyone. Today's guests are Carla Rosato and Judy Sutherland from the Macomb Intermediate School District, and we were talking about their role as attendant enforcement officers, and you have to make sure that the kids do attend school. What happens if you've tried everything you can outside of court and the parent still isn't getting the child to school? What is your option then, Judy?
Generally, when we feel like nothing that anyone has done has made a difference, and the truth is that generally that means a parent has not shown up to work with us, because virtually every case, if they show up and give us something to work with, we're going to try and work with them. The ones that tend to end up in court are the ones that did not respond to the letters and phone calls from the school, didn't respond to our certified letters, didn't show up for the school conference to meet with us, haven't contacted our office. We may have sent business cards home to try and get that extra level of communication. And when finally it's nothing else is getting their attention, then we will submit a request for a warrant authorization to the Macomb County prosecutors. The prosecutors, if they read through our reports and they authorize it, then we have the warrants sworn to in the various district courts, and it's taken to whichever district court the family has as a home address. So in particular with schools of choice, they may be registered in Warren, but if they live in St. Clair Shores, it would be a St. Clair Shores case because the crime is considered as the home base, because that's where they did not leave to go to school. So then when we bring those in is when it'll be set up for the pretrial, and the judge that it's assigned to would be involved.
So when the prosecutor looks at your reports, they're looking for all the documentation of all the missed
Right. The factual
days.
basis, yeah.
And is it also included if the child is not brought to school on time, if they're tardy?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but can you talk a little bit about that? What that means to the kids and their education?
When a child is chronically tardied or tardy to school, and whether it's 2 minutes or 15, 20 minutes, sometimes it's as late as an hour before a school will mark it as an absence, they're disrupting the education of the other kids as well. The teacher has to stop. All the kids have to stop their educational process just for this one child to walk in, hang up their coat, sit down, and catch up to where they're at. So again, we were talking about self-esteem. That impacts that child's self-esteem as well, being late all the time. And it also teaches them that school might not be the priority. Everything else is the priority. Maybe sleeping in is the priority. Maybe mom's job is more important than me getting to school on time. It sends the child a wrong message about the importance of getting to school.
I see. And you said most of the cases that end up in court are the ones where the parents just would not comply with anything else. Are you finding that court is getting their attention, that is effective?
Ironically, it's probably our most effective tool with that type of parent. And we haven't really talked about it yet, but it certainly is relevant to make sure that people are aware of. If a child is out because of a child's medical condition, not the parent having a medical issue, but the child having a medical condition, if the parent communicates well with the school, if they get the medical documentation in, if the doctor says this child should not be in school, the child shouldn't be in school. The goal of the law and our job is to not have sick children in school or children in school when they have other issues that need to be addressed. So, we hadn't really talked about that, but that's really important. Sometimes we'll have a meeting and the parent will come in and say, well, this is what's going on, and nothing's in the file. The school may not have even known. There could have been accommodations. There could have been certainly a whole different outlook to that. So we would encourage parents who have children who have medical needs that prevent their consistent attendance to get that documentation and sit down with the administrator or the counselor or whomever and make sure that those gaps are closed so that the child can get the medical care and their education both. And doctors and schools are awesome at working together when somebody lets them make that connection.
It's like you said, you're the advocate for the child. You want to get that child to school. You want to make them healthy and grow. And of course, if they have a medical condition, you'd want to know about that and
we
also
don't
make
want
sure
those
that's
to end in
addressed.
court. Correct. Absolutely. Those don't belong in court, but if there is no documentation and nothing to work with, you know, then every now and then somebody will show up and they're like, well, this is what's going on, and all they had to do was communicate, you know.
And even coming to court, the child still remains the focus, not to necessarily get the parent in trouble or thrown in jail, because it is punishable by up to 90 days in jail, as you know. The goal is to get the child to school. That child is still the focus, and after we get here and the prosecutor's authorized and we have our pretrial, we'll meet with the parent and we'll offer them, you know, as long as the prosecutor goes with it, which they usually do, a chance to keep this off of their criminal record. Have your child attend school on a regular basis for 1 year, 1 school year, and we'll ask the judge to dismiss it at the end of that school year. And in that time, we're appearing in court for the review hearings as well. It gets us a chance to work with the family on a continuing basis beyond what we had already done in the beginning. So we're at both phases. In the school and in the court, we are with the parent because the child is the goal.
It is a very unique law in the district court, our practice. Criminal cases are a big part of the docket, but this is very unique because it involves families, kids, and when I handle the cases, I'm so thankful for your being there and really doing the work that you do behind the scenes that I don't see to make sure these parents are getting the child to school. And it's great to see the improvement. You take a kid that was really struggling in school when they're not attending regularly, and then you actually see them, you know, improve over the course of these 11 months where they're under advisement. You know, and I've seen the parents be so proud of it too.
And I know that Carla and I have both been in your courtroom even when, for example, if they get their first review, and we usually ask for a review every 3 months or so, if the first review doesn't come back positive, there's not enough change, there's not enough progress, and you've said, you know, maybe parenting classes would help, maybe some family counseling or whatever, and by the end of that school year, as they've followed up on what has been asked of them, which, you know, it's all in their best interest and the child's. We've both sat here when parents told you this was the best thing that could have happened to them. And I remember one case in particular where she stood there and the father was also there, because the fathers are also accountable. If they're in the home and the child is in the care and custody of, the father can also be charged as, you know.
Now, will you, if there's both parents in the household, will you seek charges against both?
Yes.
It depends on the circumstance for me.
Okay.
Mostly, yes, because as far as a husband and wife and mother and father, you share equal responsibility.
I tend to do one at a time. I tend to start with the parent that's at home with them. If, for example, the father leaves at 6 a.m. and the mother doesn't go to work until after the kids go to school, I'm more likely to file on the mother. And if that doesn't work, then I would draw the father in. If they're both at home, then I would probably do both. But
obviously, in society, we have a lot of young parents.
Single parents.
Single parents.
That's a big one that we get.
That are either unemployed or underemployed. There has to be, I think part of the job is to give them the tools that they need. They may not have grown up learning these things.
Correct.
Or they just may not be aware of it. And a big part of it is education. I think most of the parents, obviously they love their children. They want to see them do well and excel in school. So I think if you appeal to that rather than a punishment effect, that's effective. But, you know, I do tell them I could send someone to jail for up to 90 days, as you indicated, for not sending their kid to school. You know, and I think it is that serious. If you don't do that, if you violate that, then you should go to jail. But that's the end of the line where we really don't feel they've done anything that they're required to do.
That would be completely despondent, you know, and it's rare that we have that kind of case.
And, you know, when you talk about that too, where, you know, those parents that will not do anything, I mean, do you have an obligation then to report that to any further authorities?
We are legally required to report to protective services if we suspect or witness or anything like that. We are legally required to do so. And we do, if we have to. The other thing, bringing up Protective Services, Department of Human Services, Governor Snyder also instituted a law saying that if the kids miss school too much, he will cut their welfare benefits. And that's, Judy and I, that does not come out of our office. We don't report to the state. That comes directly from the school to the state, to the Department of Human Services. The school would report the truancy.
When a family renews their cash assistance now, the workers are sending a form that the schools are supposed to be reporting back on whether or not the child is attending consistently.
Okay,
That's had a big impact.
I can imagine. And you two are the only enforcement officers throughout the whole county?
The whole county. The whole
That's a
county.
lot of miles.
That's a lot of miles.
How do you break up who gets assigned which cases?
It's a random draw for a first referral. So if a family is referred and neither one of us have ever worked with the case before, it's just strictly who's booked the farthest, or just keeping the numbers
Even.
as much as possible. Once one of us starts working with a family, then we keep that family instead of starting all over to getting to know their history. And so if that parent happens to end up having 6 children, that attendance officer gets all 6 children if they're referred.
So you
by
get to
that,
know a
so-
family quite well
Yeah.
sometimes.
I think it's very good that people like you two are in these jobs, because it takes a lot of compassion and obviously smartness to really get these things done. I always say you kind of serve as both the sheriff and the attorney in a lot of cases, and you're always well prepared in court, and I'm happy for all you're doing. And I want everyone to know there is the Macomb Intermediate School District Attendant Enforcement Officers. They are here to make sure that children are attending school regularly, which is required by the state. This is Judge Matthew Sabaugh for Judge's Corner. Thank you.